Over the past week, protests and strikes across various parts of Iran have intensified more than ever. From the crowded streets of Tehran and Karaj, where anti-government slogans echo at night, to protests by retirees and workers in Isfahan, Bushehr and Gilan, and security tensions in Baluchistan, where suppressive forces have raided people's homes to instill fear. Yet, the people have not remained silent. Instead, they have united more than ever, chanting, "This is the year the regime will be overthrown." In this edition of Iran Protests Report, we will review these protests and strikes and examine their messages and consequences. Protests by truck drivers at the Parvizkhan border crossing. Widespread public protests over power outages in Karaj, Tehran, and several other cities. Street protests in Dasht and raids by security forces on Baluchi homes. Protests by workers, housing applicants, and dissatisfied people in Iraq and various other regions. Stay with us as we take a look at this week's protests by the Iranian people against dictatorship. The first part of the program is dedicated to strikes and protests by various social groups. This week, we witnessed a strike by heavy vehicle drivers at the Parvizkhan border crossing, who stopped working due to economic hardships and harsh working conditions. Additionally, Social Security retirees in Avaz, Shush, Isfahan, and Tehran gathered in front of government offices chanting, "The poverty line is 30 million tomans, our salary is 10 million, protesting against this injustice, as they do every week. Alongside the retirees, manufacturers in industrial town in Tehran held a protest against unfair economic policies and the skyrocketing costs of production.
از خوزستان تا گیلان مرگ بر این مدیران از خوزستان تا گیلان مرگ بر این مدیران از خوزستان تا سیستان مرگ بر این مدیران از خوزستان تا گیلان مرگ بر این مدیران ننگ ما صدا و سیمای ما ننگ ما صدا و سیمای ما ننگ ما صدا و سیمای ما دولت انتصابی دروغ میگه حسابی 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 ننگ ما صدا و سیمای ما ننگ ما صدا و سیمای ما وزیر کار با دولت دستش تو جیب ملته
تنوع اعتراضی بازنشستگان فولاد و معدن در استان اصفهان خیابان نشاط خواستار اجرای صحیح همسالسالی سازی سال 1399
فریاد بزن حق تو فریاد بزن
که فولاد ایران به ثمر رساندند و
حق فریاد بزن
برای حقوق خود
حق تو فریاد بزن
احسن بر شما
حق تو فریاد بزن حق تو فریاد بزن.
Now, let's turn to social and urban protests. In recent days, a wave of protests over power outages has spread across Karaj, Tehran, and several other cities. Protesters expressed their anger with chants such as, "Khamenei, you bloodthirsty tyrant, we will bury you," and "Death to the dictator." Residents of Iraq also took to the streets to protest severe air pollution, chanting powerful slogans condemning the destructive policies of the regime.
شهر 24 بهمن
مرگ بر خامنه ای لعنت بر خمینی
خامنه ای ضحاک میکشیمت زیر خاک لعنت بر خمینی مرگ بر دیکتاتور.
In Baluchistan, suppressive forces raided people's homes in Pasku, Sib, and Soran counties, firing shots into the air. Their goal was to demolish people's homes, but they were met with the anger and resistance of Baluchi residents. In Dedasht, in the province of Kogaluye and Boyer Ahmad, nighttime protests erupted as people chanted, "This year is the year the regime will be overthrown," voicing their opposition to the mullah's dictatorship. Now, let's look at nighttime protests. One of the most significant events of the week was the rise in nighttime protests across different parts of the country. In Tehran, Karaj, Dedasht, and other cities, people broke the suffocating atmosphere of repression by chanting anti-government slogans in the darkness of night. These chants were a powerful response to the regime's efforts to suppress dissent and spread fear in society. Now let's take a look at some footage from these nighttime protests.
امشب 21 بهمن 1403 تهران. مرگ بر جمهوری اسلامی.
مرگ بر دیکتاتور! مرگ بر دیکتاتور! مرگ بر دیکتاتور! توپ تانک پشت بشه، آخوند باید گم بشه!
مرگ بر ستمگر، چه شاه باشه چه رهبر. مرگ بر ستمگر، چه شاه باشه چه رهبر.
This week's protests showed that the Iranian people will not remain silent in the face of repression and economic hardship. Workers, retirees, drivers, and various social groups continue to protest persistently. Nighttime protests demonstrate the continuation of the people's uprising against dictatorship. Repression in Baluchistan and other cities has only fueled the fire of public anger. The trajectory of the protests shows that the regime is losing its ability to control crises, and society is moving toward larger uprisings. Yes, Iran stands on the brink of a major transformation. Widespread strikes, stronger nighttime protests, and the people's resilience in overthrowing dictatorship This voice cannot be silenced. We end this edition of Iran Protest Report with higher hopes for a free and democratic Iran.
Follow the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran on YouTube, Facebook, X, and our website.